Joining us for more on this is Acting City Manager Tshepo Makola. Mr. Makola, very good evening to you. Thanks very much for your time. A few hours ago, this officer was apparently struggling to at the hospital where he was. Do you have any updates for us?
Well, the officer is in a critical but stable condition in Alberton, a private hospital that he was moved to after the operation was conducted in Milpark Hospital.
Quite a travesty, in fact, an indictment on the part of the city that he could have, I mean, this is a guess, of course, that all of this could have been avoided had he at Milpark Hospital not turned the officer away.
Indeed, it is. And having been in the emergency services field for about 18 years, I find it very strange because the emergency protocol is very clear. If a patient comes into your facility and they are wounded in that manner, you have to do what we call a triage. You assess the patient, and if the patient is priority one, which what the officer was, you treat the patient irrespective of challenges or issues you may have of an administrative nature. You stabilize the patient, and once you stabilize the patient, then you transfer out to a facility that would be able to accommodate the patient. And that's how it works. And that's how it's worked for many years. So for me, it's a bit of a strange action that Milpark would have taken, given the fact that even if you look at the amount that is purported to be owed, is 35 million. But in fact, if we look at our own records, it's about 3.9. Then later this afternoon at about 1 o'clock, after we've sent a team of executives to go meet up with Milpark, the number dropped to about 18 million. And 18 million, the Milpark says 8 million of that is current and 10 million is about a year old. So yeah, there's a bit of a challenge in terms of what do we owe. But what is more important is the relationship that we have with Milpark that we've maintained. And we've always had that relationship with the group. And we've always sent our officers, as head of EMS, we used to send our firefighters there on a regular, and they were treated. I mean, just this year, the chief of police was shot, and we took him to Milpark, and he was treated. So I certainly don't understand the difference now in not treating a critically ill patient who's got 2 gunshot wound on the basis of a bill that is also not very clear. It's really just a...
Procedurally, perhaps, but the situation would not arise had you paid your bills.
Yeah, so maybe I need to explain how the relationship works with Milpark. So as you'd understand, you have what we call COIDA, which is a compensation for occupational injuries and diseases. So every time an employee is ill on duty or is injured on duty, we send them to a private hospital. There is a number of forms that must be completed, and that fund is managed through the Department of Labor. Only once the Department of Labor then says they are happy with the submission, then they give us the go-ahead to then pay the service provider, whether it's life care or it's healthcare, and then we make the payment. So there will never be a situation where you pay Milpark or any other group their account is current, because it's based on the submissions and the number of employees that would have visited the hospital if they were on duty, if they were to be sick on duty or they were short on duty. Hence, I say the numbers from our records, we owe about 3.9, and that 3.9 is what the team was working on in the week for submission. And we have explained this with Milpark, we've explained our payment process, and this we've explained with them through the regular interaction.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you over the amounts, because obviously, I mean, I don't know the real state of affairs there, but it would seem that this is not an isolated incident. You do owe other service providers, like a car rental company, a lot of money that you still haven't been able to settle.
Well, of course, the city's financial position is no secret. We report on this on a regular, we report on a quarterly basis through the Section 71 reports that we take to council. Our collections are not sufficient enough to cover our expenditure, and of course we've put in management controls to deal with the income. So what we generally do now is we have 5 priority areas, and the fleet, because it's a tool of the trade, falls under that priority area. The next priority will be the bulk purchases in terms of water and electricity, because we buy electricity from Eskom and we buy water from Rand Water, and then we distribute. So those is what we prioritize, and of course we prioritize salaries, and we pay salaries and third party that come through, and then the rest we then look at how we then spread across the different creditors. But we've now looked at aggressive collection strategies. We've reviewed the value chain in terms of the system in itself. There's implementations that we've done from a system perspective. We've upgraded the SEP. We are now moving towards SEP Rise. We're actually, ultimately, we want to get to SEP HANA, and we've upgraded that. We are looking at better controls in terms of how to issue the bills. And also we've worked with the entities to look at reduce the number of queries on the bills so that our people can pay. Ultimately, our citizens are not paying, and some because they have genuine queries, others may not have genuine queries that they are not paying. That, of course, affects the city's collection and revenue base, minus the fact that the economy is not doing well. But we think there are some inefficiencies from the city side that we've started to implement. We are currently looking at how do we then outsource the collection part, the soft collection, meaning where we get to link the customer with a property, and we are then able to do an analysis on how much you earn and how much you can actually pay, because every cent counts, and that's the work that we are doing to improve our collections. And that's, I don't think that's been a secret. It's been in the public domain, and it's in the reports that go to council in terms of Section 71.
Are you saying that you are not at fault as the people who run the affairs of the city? In other words, you are doing a great job. Thank you very much.
That's not what I'm saying. I think I was quite clear that there are challenges.
Like?
There are challenges, like I said, collection. So the payment levels.
I'm saying apart from collection. In other words, you are running the city very well on your part.
Well, we are doing fairly well. We're not where we want to be, as an example. So let me link what the financial position does. So in the absence of capital, as you know, the city's infrastructure is about 50 years old. If you do not refresh or reinstall that infrastructure, you are obviously going to collapse. And that's what we are seeing at the moment. So we've done work with DBSA to get international funding to make sure that we reinvest in the infrastructure. And we've took a report to council, 2023, that council approved that for the next 10 years, we need to focus on infrastructure, rebuild the infrastructure so that we are able to then collect. But if you link that back to the collections, we do need to put in new meters. Some of the meters that we have both on water and electricity are obsolete. And as a result, as you know, as a consumer, the only guarantee you have that you've consumed is when that meter is running. So if we are unable to read the meter because it's obsolete and we've not replaced over a number of years, of course your collections are going to be affected. And that's work that we are doing now. In the mid-year adjustment, we've allocated additional budget to water and City Power to buy additional meters so that we can collect. But of course, the other side that we are doing is managing the current expenditure to the levels where we are collecting. Just in the third quarter, we were 1.1 billion short of the 4.5 monthly target that we have. So there is improvement in terms of the collection, but I think we really need to do a bit more than what we are doing at the moment.
As far as SAMU is concerned, corruption also has a lot to do with your precarious financial situation.
Well, I wouldn't comment on the corruption. I mean, if there's corrupt activities that SAMU is aware of, and they need to refer it to the law enforcement agencies. We have the Group Forensic Investigation, which investigates matters of corruption, and based on the outcome, we deal with it. I mean, we have a disciplinary report, a financial disciplinary report. There are 6 matters that we are currently dealing with as the member in that board. The matter of 4 entities, the supply of fire engines that were not spec'd according to the requirements. Those matters are now, and the investigations are concluded. We took disciplinary action. We're at the point where we are collecting. I mean, the AG has indicated that we needed to recover about 260 million from the sub-project, and we've collected that money through a discussion with SEP and that money has come through. We are in discussion now with MTN as well on the collection. So there's a number of actions and activities that we are putting in. But if Labour is aware of corruption cases that we've not dealt with, I think they can submit them to us or through the law enforcement agencies if they don't believe that we are capable of dealing with those cases, as it were.
In other words, SAMU must put up or shut up.
No, that's not what we are saying. SAMU is a critical stakeholder. We engage with SAMU on a regular basis. We are saying there may be cases that they are raising that we are not aware of. Those that we are aware of, as I've said, I've given you a number of examples of matters that we've investigated through the group forensic investigation, and we've implemented the recommendations of those, the outcome of those investigations. So if there are matters that they are referring to that we are not aware of, I'm happy to receive that. We have a clear, open relationship with SAMU. They are a stakeholder, they're a key stakeholder, they're an important stakeholder. So we wouldn't say to them, well, you know, shut. We're saying if we don't know, we are not aware, just submit. Then we'll put it through the process and we'll handle it, because we don't want to really hide any corruption in the city of Johannesburg.
But, I mean, can you say without any fear of contradicting yourself that as far as you are aware, there is no corruption, or there's no corruption that you're not dealing with?
Look, I can say to you, all the corruption that's been reported or that's been picked up through the audit, we have put them through the investigation process. I can't generally speak on matters that have not been reported, but matters that have been reported, we've referred them to investigations, and the outcome we've implemented. I mean, you can talk about the Usindiso outcome report. We've referred those to the necessary board to take the required action. If whether you ask me about SIU reports that have been issued to the city, I'm aware of 3 or 4 of those that we've then referred to the city's Labour Department for implementation. At other times, we have implemented, we've appointed law firms to implement the recommendations of those. So I wouldn't say that as the city of Johannesburg, we are not dealing with matters of corruption as they arise. Of course, we must put them through the process for investigation and then deal with the outcomes of that investigation. Hence, even this matter, the Milpark matter, we've made 2, in fact, 3 decisions. 1, refer the matter to the Health Profession Council so we can determine whether the level of treatment was adequate and determine whether that treatment provided was correct. 2, we said refer the matter to the group forensic investigation to investigate if there's any wrongdoing or any malfeasance from the executives in the city, so that we can take action if there's any gap, because if indeed this matter could have been dealt with in time, that is what we want. Lastly, is we did say that we'll also write to the Speaker of Council to look at the breach of any communication protocols in terms of statement, and if we need to then also write to the media ombuds in terms of the information that was provided to the media without verification or even right of reply. That can be looked at by independent bodies, because we don't want to be the player and ref. We believe that this matter could have been handled differently. In any case, the officer should have been treated irrespective of whether we owe 3.5 or 18 million or 35 million, whatever the figure is. So we've referred those for investigation, and we'll certainly come back and report on what the outcome. The deadline is very clear. We indicated to GFS by next week Friday we want that report so that we can then implement. So if corruption emerges, we'll then deal with it at that point. If
the people of the city were to say to you, take us into your confidence as the chief financial, accounting officer, how would, if you're to stargaze, how would the next Auditor General report look? Can you take them into confidence? Can you vouch?
I can do that, because we've started the work. So if you look at the previous, in fact, what the Auditor General is complaining about is that for the last 3 years we've been stagnant. Right? We've received an unqualified audit, which is one step over to get to a clean audit. We can debate whether there's a clean audit in technical terms, because big international companies don't really look at a clean audit. They look at whether unqualified and your processes are clean. So given the big machinery we are running in the city, so there are 3 areas of concern from the AG. 1 is that there is no consequence management that happens when there's a finding. And if we do consequence management, it's really at the lower level and it's not at the highest level, which is the executive. So we've addressed that, and I'll explain how we've addressed that. That's the first. Two is we are not following our supply chain processes to the latter in terms of deviations. You'll recall that MFMA has about 3 ways that you can procure. You go through a tender process, you do regulation, you use a tender used from another state organ, or you deviate from the normal procurement process based on the circumstances. So we've been complying. I think the AG now is saying you are now using Regulation 36 too heavily, and you need to obviously make sure that you take control of that. That's the third point. The second point, my apologies. The third point is on the performance information that we are providing. As an example, there's a program called the Extended Social Package. We are arguing as the city that if you look at all informal settlements, they do qualify as under the Extended Social Package in terms of households that do not qualify. But of course, they are saying to us, no, in terms of the KPI, the information you provide does not link to the information that we want. So we've held 3 workshops with the executives, and we are very clear that we are not going to have repeat findings, and we are going to make sure that if there's any repeat finding and there's no technical explanation, consequence management will happen at the highest level. So executive directors, which are HODs, and accounting officers in the entities will then take responsibility. And I think we'll have a better outcome. We've also asked the AG to come a bit early in the year so that they will start with the audit and clean what we need to clean. And of course, automating our financial system process to do financial statements.
So we should have more time to actually explore some of those issues. But thank you very much for coming through. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, sir.